All right, everybody. Thank you for making your way over here. We're going to begin the panel now. Welcome to this panel, everyone. I'm Andrew Blume. I'm the community manager for the AGRITECTURE platform. AGRITECTURE was founded 6 years ago and has since become the sister company to Blue Planet Consulting. The AGRITECTURE platform includes a blog that tracks the industry, a workshop series, which has hosted 7 workshops in 7 cities, and we're one of the principal organizers of this event, the 2017 Aglanta Conference. Aglanta, as you all know, was also organized by the Mayor's Office of Atlanta and by Platinum level sponsor Southern Company. And thanks to their efforts, we've now had over 250 people from the community and from across the world gathering right here in downtown Atlanta, which I think is pretty cool. Joining all of you, the guests here in the room, and those who may be watching this video online, are 9 community partners, 15 sponsors, and the keynote speaker, the remarkable Stephen Ritz, who's really amazing, and I'm really looking forward to his talk. So, as you guys know, you've been here for the morning workshops. Aglanta's already been an inspired experience full of optimism and networking and knowledge exchange. And that's all great. And the morning workshops and the previous panels here at the Freight Depot have everyone buzzing with people looking to plant more seeds in their communities. And this energy and optimism is really important for vertical farming to fuel the growth of the industry. But equally important to all the positivity surrounding everything is that entrepreneurs and business owners anticipate what challenges they might face in founding a vertical farm. Because we all know farming is really hard work. But we don't all know what risks and strains, what other risks and strains might be out there. So I'm pleased to have joining me today 3 bold entrepreneurs who have been down that trailblazing road. Mike, Paul, Matt, on behalf of all the future farmers who are here listening in on this panel, just seriously, thank you guys, because 1,000 thank yous, because your battle-hardened knowledge, sharing that with us today is very useful to all these folks, and the spirit of this panel is to help everyone preempt the potential roadblocks that they might face in starting their own operations, and your open and honest answers will help everybody in this room and in the industry learn from your valuable experience. So, all that being said, I want to introduce our panelists. We have Matt from PodPonics, we have Paul from FarmedHere, and we have Mike, who was with Local Garden. And I guess my first question to you all is let's just kick off this panel by you all telling us a little bit about your respective farms and what your role was at those farms. So let's start off with Matt, because you're the closest to me.
Fair enough, thank you. Again, I'm Matt Liotta. I founded PodPonics here in Atlanta about 7 years ago. We raised about $15 million and built a farm that, in the end, when we shut it down, was capable of 500,000 pounds of annual production, which I believe is still the largest vertical farm ever built to date. Let's see, I remain CEO of PodPonics. I'm now also co-CEO of Agrinamics, which has taken on the technology that we developed at PodPonics, and we're continuing to market that across the world. Our focus now is on the technology space. We pivoted as an organization away from operating a farm and focus only on the technology today.
So here you go. Yeah. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Hardej. I'm one of the co-founders of FarmedHere. First of all, thank you, Blue Planet Consulting, Agriculture. Thanks you guys in Atlanta, City of Atlanta, for putting this together. Southern Energy, I think it's a really cool event. It shows you that there is a need for more vertical farming conferences and events. So great honor to be here with you guys. I don't like to be in the Shuttered group, obviously, but I am, and it's just part of the process. I got involved in vertical farming in 2009. I started a company in Chicago called FarmedHere. I was the original co-founder and the CTO of the company for the next 6 years. We have developed a 90,000 square foot facility after years of R&D work and regulatory and policy work with City of Chicago and local municipal and state governments. we really took vertical farming to scale. Our main focus was in aquaponics technology. I'm sure some of you are familiar with aquaponics. Proud to say that our farm was first the USDA organic certified vertical farm in the US in 2011 and consistently ever since. Got it to scale where we have been servicing almost 200 grocery stores in Chicagoland in Midwest. Developed a very strong consumer product, and now I'm with a company called Civic Farms. For the last 2 years I've been working with Illumitex, an LED lighting company out of Austin, Texas. I'm still involved with Illumitex. However, I recently co-founded a company called Civic Farms, which is basically vertical farming 2.0. I think that's it.
Hi, my name is Mike Nasseri. I joined Local Garden as a greenhouse salad cutter, as we put it. I joined about 4 months after they started operations, and so I bring a different perspective of kind of what it is to work day to day on the floor and some of the issues that we had there. Local Garden was North America's first urban rooftop greenhouse. We were located right in the downtown core of Vancouver, on top of a parkade that was given a preferential lease by the city of Vancouver as part of the greenest city efforts. Yeah, and I just want to thank the sponsors and Blue Planet Consulting especially for putting this together and bringing me out here.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for those introductions. I think a good place to start for this panel is a lot of people in this room are thinking about how to get started with their own farm, and one of the first major decisions you have to make as an urban farmer and a vertical farmer is where do you build your farm, and how do you choose the site, and what is that site selection process like? So maybe you guys could walk us through a little bit of how you ended up choosing the sites that you built, and you know, was that the right move, why or why not?
Sure. So we actually started in an abandoned parking lot near what is now called Ponce City Market. Back then, Ponce City Market didn't exist, wasn't announced. It was a really bad place to be. Trust me, they came by with the police and told us about the drug dealers that would be in the area and so on and so forth. But that's where we got started. And our idea at the time was we wanted to be right in the heart of the city because we thought that part of what we were bringing to the table was to grow at the point of consumption. So we wanted to be right there, and we thought we proved ourselves on that model when we started selling to local restaurants like Fourth and Swift, which was literally on the same block as us. Later, we ended up moving down by the airport when we learned that the way this really works is it's about being at the point of distribution, not at the point of consumption. Because once we got big enough inside the city to actually work with distributors, they would come, pick up the product, drive it down to Forest Park to their distribution center, then drive it back to the city to the restaurants. So we learned that being close to distribution centers is what really mattered. And of course, that's where land is cheaper, power is cheaper, everything's cheaper there. So that was an early lesson for us.
Very interesting. Our story is not that dissimilar from PodPonics. However, as I would say, you know, the decisions that we were making back in 2009 or 2008 were not based on anything other than just pure luck and coincidence sometimes. So we obviously understood that the purpose of vertical farming is to grow food where people live in city centers. So we set off to set up a test farm in the middle of a food desert in a neighborhood called Englewood, Southside Chicago, probably one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the country. The reason for that is we wanted to show people that number one, technology works. We can actually grow food in the middle of food desert, create jobs, and potentially even sell that product to local community. And we did. Later in 2010-11, we scaled into a larger commercial scale, utility scale vertical farm. Where actually, you know, some of us have a lot of experience in real estate and development and construction. I'm an architect myself. I've been in real estate development business for 16 years prior to getting involved in vertical farming. So we had a good understanding of regulations, zoning codes, building codes, and valuation of real estate, and also how to underwrite a potential site or building for that type of, you know, very rigorous food safe use. Nevertheless, there were a number of challenges we had to overcome. One of them included regulations or lack of regulations and how urban farming is defined, or it's not defined actually in most of the zoning codes. And major US cities. So the first location was really driven by the fact that we did not want to be in the city of Chicago, despite the fact that in 2010 I was on Mayor Daley's task force on vertical farming in the city of Chicago, and we worked for over 18 months on rewriting city of Chicago zoning codes and later addressing building codes and business licensing regulations, working for all kinds of departments at state, county, and even obviously municipal level. But we've made a decision that a smaller community, more nimble government, where we can get our approvals faster would be a better choice. So we set our farm in a community called Bedford Park, which is literally across the street from Chicago. It's a small industrial suburb, and that was our first site.
So I was not involved in the site selection, but we had some interesting experiences operating on a rooftop. There was a lot of logistical difficulties of getting the infrastructure up there during construction and just day to day bringing pallets of seedlings up to the rooftop and then bringing the product down. I would highly recommend, if you're trying rooftop, to consider like building proper infrastructure for it, and also would just point out that downtown rooftop is great for demonstration, but for production, there's a lot cheaper land that is still possible to get from farm to table in the same day, and so I would consider kind of two cases of demo versus production, depending on what you're trying to develop.
That's great. Thanks for those answers, guys. I think that's really interesting what you all had to say about the difference between sales and distribution and the location playing a role in that. And that makes me think about how else were sales different in your business planning and in your models versus in the reality once you had a full-scale farm. And maybe if you had a pilot farm, how else did that change from having your pilot in your business models and in your planning to when that pilot became scaled up, and how did the sales translate within those changes?
Start, or should I start?
So when we first looked at this, we identified three potential verticals for selling our product: restaurants, institutional customers like schools, education facilities, hospitals, and then of course the retailers. We assumed at the time that it would be easiest to sell to the restaurants. They would provide the most profit. The institutions would be somewhere in the middle. They would have higher volume, less profit. And the retailers would be the absolute worst to work with because they would have the least amount of profit and the most volume requirements. We were completely wrong. So as it turns out, restaurants are really hard to work with because they're so eager for your product, get it out there, and then of course they change their mind. Chefs are notoriously fickle when it comes to products, and overnight they can just change their mind. And if you go and sell to a chef, you're basically having to do all the same sales process that you would for any customer, but you maybe only move 6 to 10 pounds a week to that one customer, whereas an institutional customer will move thousands of pounds, or a retail customer millions of pounds. So think about that in terms of the customer acquisition side. Further, what we learned ultimately is that all the money when it comes to leafy greens is in salad mix at the grocery store. So you go to the grocery store and you look at that salad mix and clamshells, that is where all the money is. Literally, there is more revenue in that grocery store's produce department in salad mix than the next 2 and 3 categories combined. They have a massive scale. They will pay you for the product. Whole Foods was amazing when it came to their willingness to pay a premium for the product. And Kroger was not a slouch either, and they're the second largest grocery store in the United States. So for us, it was completely backwards from what we expected it to be.
Okay, so again, not that similar to what Matt is saying. However, I think we've done a terrific job on sales and marketing fronts. So we started with really very serious analysis of the market and trying to figure out what kind of crops we should grow. So we focused on crops that are obviously high value, but are also very difficult to be grown in traditional farms, that are subject to all kinds of risks in the distribution process or system, and time and temperature and so forth. And also we spent a lot of time trying to learn and understand consumers and what are their preferences, what are the fastest growing categories in dark leafy greens or specialty greens and so forth. So Matt is absolutely correct. Working with restaurants is very, very difficult unless you work with major distributors and maybe at some massive scale it low margin, and it's almost basically you're competing with commodity growers to some extent. The money is truly in retail. That's what we found out, and we've proven that. We have developed a very successful consumer brand called FarmedHere. As I mentioned, we were selling to over 200 grocery stores and actually driving their sales up. So Whole Foods Market, among others, was very instrumental in our success. A great partner, great company. They have mentored us for about 4 years, actually. Our distribution model was DSD, so direct to the store, although at a certain point when we achieved a proper scale, we were upgraded to working through their distribution center, or DC, and that way we were able to distribute our product across Midwest or even Southern Canada. Still trying to keep it local, obviously. But I think as far as sales and marketing, and I lost the second part of your question, maybe you can remind me, but it's extremely important that we, all of us, and I'm sure a lot of you are growers or want to be growers or want to be vertical farmers or greenhouse farmers, that we focus on the product first, and just like any other business that you're trying to develop, you have to figure out what do you want to sell, at what price point, why you want to sell it, where you want to sell it to, and then develop a technology and a process that allows you to make a profit, number one, develop that product, number two, in a good quality and the shape and form that the customers are willing to buy it at.
So the second part of that question was, did you do a pilot for FarmedHere, and how did the sales differ in your pilot versus your scale up?
Yeah, so yes, we did a pilot. Sales and the scale up were much better than we anticipated. The purpose of the pilot was really to prove up number of technologies. We did not know where to go, and trust me, 2009, 2010 was a completely different world than today as far as understanding of hydroponics and aeroponics, aquaponics, and vertical farming, lighting, and so forth. There were very few solution providers out there, or even very few lighting companies that knew what the hell needs to be done to grow plants indoors in a commercial scale. So we set up a test farm. We ran it for almost 2 years. We took product to market. We tested it with customers. We got a lot of customer feedback, and then it took off. It was really a very positive experience from sales.
Yeah, so local gardens sold to restaurants and local grocers. We eventually lost some of the restaurant customers for reasons mentioned, and they have very high quality control standards. And we also, we were a unique farm in that we were both a demonstration unit that was selling to the market, but really the greenhouse was there to sell the system at larger scale to other customers. And that kind of produced a dual conflicting mandate of quality control on one side and producing volume on the other side. And it turns out customer expectations, through my customer discovery, customers don't really like stems. They feel they're getting ripped off, and your units can produce some great leaves, but it's a matter of managing expectations, I think, and really finding that product market fit. There was a unique aspect on the pilot angle as well, where for the verticrop technology, it was done in a pilot in Pegton Zoo in the UK, and while the commercial operation was set up in Vancouver, there was very little continuity. Like, I was never able to reach out to the person who had done the pilot project and find out some of those lessons learned, and some aspects of the larger scale technology that you see in the slide had issues that I don't know if they had at the smaller scale, and so definitely have some continuity between pilots and commercial scale.
So just to add to what Paul said, one of the things we found when we got into retail, we went into the market thinking that we wanted to compete directly with the California growers, and so we priced our product exactly the same as them, and we wanted to have a better value proposition to the customers. Namely, you pay the same price, but you get a higher quality product that has no pesticides, better shelf life, etc. Now, later, this was actually after Paul was no longer with FarmedHere, we actually entertained a merger with FarmedHere, and during that time, it was actually very enlightening because we both learned a lot about each other. And one of the things that I learned about FarmedHere was they were way better than we were at selling to grocery stores, because what they were selling their product for, we just were amazed by. I mean, if we had been selling our product for that price, we would have been making a lot of money. And because our focus had been to sell at the same price as everybody else and try and lower the cost of producing it. And so what we ended up finding was that we could produce FarmedHere's product and they could sell our product, we would have both been amazing.
We should have merged.
Yeah, that's an interesting anecdote, and it's also very interesting to hear about how fickle restaurants are. So I want to direct the next question to Mike. And Mike, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the system's maintenance, and more specifically, what part of those daily activities added value, and which parts were just excess drivers of cost?
Yeah, so something that none of you are probably anticipating is the cost of cleaning your infrastructure and your facility are going to drive a bigger portion of your daily activities than you expect. And really, when you look at the farm, like Paul framed it well in his open letter about the failure of FarmedHere, is this industry is a combination of manufacturing principles and futuristic farming. And so there's all sorts of opportunities where you can eliminate time waste in the way that lean production system dictates, where you can really add value. So we had humans cutting the lettuce while there were auto harvesters out there that could have basically turned our operation into a packaging line as opposed to a harvesting and packaging line. And I think looking at things like that and establishing lessons learned from other industries that go back 30 years, like auto manufacturing lines, and having single piece flow of your units through the process and iterating on those processes, definitely some opportunities. But for us particular, if we had something to replace the scissor lift that you see in there, we would have had less contamination points, which scissor lifts are not an ideal solution. And I don't, yeah, it's they never get clean. Yeah, don't use scissor lifts. Find another solution, please.
It's very telling that Aero Farms, which has been in the news as the big deal farm now, is using scissor lifts. Absolutely don't use scissor lifts.
So I think this is part of the reason why I asked this question is because earlier we heard the councilwoman speaking about opportunities to create jobs, and there's kind of this dichotomy between jobs on the one hand and automation on the other hand. And I'm wondering, how do you guys feel the future of vertical farming will incorporate automation? And maybe if there are vertical farms that do want to create jobs, are there any novel workforce strategies that you can think of that would get people to work, but also not have, as we're hearing, no scissor lifts, because it sounds like that was a tough experience for you folks?
So I'm going to be very politically incorrect, and I'm going to say just like the last elections, correct? Both candidates, presidential candidates, were talking about jobs. What jobs? We need to start asking questions. What jobs? How much are you getting paid? What are the benefits, and so forth? So it's not about jobs. It's about quality jobs where workers can make decent money and have a good lifestyle, correct? So, that's the goal. So in that sense, automation is not bad. I don't think the idea here is to develop vertical farms where you have a lot of people working very, very hard physically for very little money. That's not our goal. And I think automation in vertical farming would make sense. However, what I think all of us were challenged at 6-7 years ago with the fact that none of the technologies that we have been using have been scaled prior to this. So for example, personally, I was overly focused on the technology versus the process. And although there are many, many resources out there, and look, there are a lot of experts in manufacturing that we could have brought in early on and start talking about the process and the design of the process, and really look at it as more of a food manufacturing than anything else, but we did not have resources. One of the biggest challenges to that, and I know I'm digressing from the labor question, was really that while we were producing and scaling, we had to conduct R&D. Not only we had to have time for R&D, but also money and space. So I think it was a killer of a formula.
Yeah, I just want to second everything he just said. First of all, we also suffered from having to develop the technology that we were operating with, and ultimately that proved too much for us, and we had to pick one or the other, and we chose technology over operating. But more importantly, one of the things that we talked about as a panelist, is making sure that we give the audience some information about what you don't know that you're going to learn. And here's what you're going to learn. People are the problem. They are the biggest problem facing this industry, because you will spend more on labor than anything else. And as you start to get lower cost labor people, which is very good for bringing jobs to underserved areas and all of those, you will have new burdens that you didn't expect, like them having court dates and not showing up for work, or them getting mad and sabotaging your facility. You know how easy it is to destroy a farm if you pour too much of a chemical in the irrigation water? It's really easy. And there's just so many things associated with people that are difficult to deal with that we underestimated. We did all the right things. We timed doing these labor tasks ourselves, saw how long it took, and then made plans for when we scaled up, how many people we'd need. And then, of course, the people that we hired didn't do them at the same speed or proficiency that we did. And so there's so many things that happen with labor. We could probably spend hours giving you insights into everything that happens in labor. But I assure you that you are underestimating labor, and it will be the biggest cost and the most likely failure of your farm.
Matt, you're absolutely right. And also, I think we're not talking about solutions today, correct? Just giving you guys feedback and information that on things that went wrong and things that we have learned. But I think scaling labor to a more sophisticated, higher paid technology jobs is something that really needs to happen. I think that's probably the only solution. With a little bit of automation and higher educated labor force. So for example, one of the things we've done early on, we realized we're not educators. We don't have time and resources to train people. But there are people who do that for a living, universities and colleges and so forth. And we set up a job training program with City Colleges of Chicago that's still up and running in collaboration with Chicago Botanic Garden and a non-for-profit arm called Windy City Harvest. Probably close to 2,000 graduates by now in urban farming, aquaponics, food safety and growing and so forth. And it shows that this could work, but I think we need to raise the bar on what the expectations are for the vertical farming industry and what kind of jobs are we actually going to create and what jobs we should be creating.
Thanks. So, Mike, as Harvest Supervisor, you were kind of more on the ground level with the labor, and what advice would you have to potential managers and operators to communicate and work well with their workforce?
Yeah, well, I've got about 5 points here, but I think one of the most interesting things I discovered was there's an opportunity with the farm to table in the same day opportunity that, in my opinion, we weren't really achieving the potential of the farm by shipping out the next day and having overnight refrigeration. We had the CEO's wife would come in the mornings on many days and kind of provide a bit of extra labor, and it was kind of an opportunity for her to do some work in the period that she had available. And so there's this concept of surge labor where if you are trying to get your product on the shelf by the time people are going to the grocery store, I think there's an opportunity to employ parents who are dropping kids off at kindergarten and picking them up around noon, and kind of bulging your labor in the morning in order to get to a certain point, and having a smaller core team that's really working on the long-term strategy. And so it's really kind of, I haven't seen it in any other industries, but I think that's a real opportunity to offer work that can actually employ some of those parents with kids. And just going back to the last point as well, like if we had a very basic dishwasher design that was built for our trays, that could have significantly reduced that cost. And that speaks to automation versus labor. It's not a matter of one or the other. You need humans to do the things that computers aren't good at, and computers will replace, and technology will replace the things that they're better at humans than. So it's all systems, like human-computer interaction or interdependence is something to be considered. And as a younger person on the team, for everyone who has the money in this room, which are in that 75 million people of baby boomers mentioned earlier, the millennials that are going to come to you are going to be willing to leave better paying jobs to work in this high impact space. Now, at our company, I was highly under leveraged, as were the other two people who had degrees in biology. And the whole manufacturing thing, it's about not just having a process, but enabling the process owners to iterate on that. And so, really, I'd love to see more mentorship from the older generation. And I promise you that you are going to learn just as much from millennials and the others as they will from you.
Yeah, just to add one other point to that, when you get into the grocery stores, they tell you when to deliver to them, and that's generally in the morning. So, there's can be really difficult logistics, and all the grocery stores want it at all the same time. And of course, if you've got to do a bunch of harvest that takes a lot of time, you've got to schedule that before you do everything else to pack it and do it. And then of course, if you get into food safety programs that require you to hold it for pathogen testing for 24 hours, you got to factor that in. So, there's a lot of neat things you could do on labor, but then your customers destroy all that for you, just so be aware of that.
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear about the novel ideas that Mike proposed. I think we heard Stan earlier talking about surge energy and how that could be an opportunity, and now to hear about surge labor also being an opportunity is interesting. So these are some things to consider. And all of this kind of brings up the next question, which is kind of a little bit based around automation, which is the data and the data that you collect at your farms. Obviously, that contributes in some way to automation and to getting your growers to grow better and faster. And how much did your yields change as you began to amass your data? And how important was that data for running your farm? And I'm going to ask that question to Matt first, because Matt and I got breakfast the other day, and he told me he's been coding his computer since he was 6 years old. So I'm really interested to hear his answer.
Yeah, so we collect a lot of data. I mean, we have thousands of sensors at every farm that we're in. Every one of them is reporting every second, if not less than that. And we're not just storing all that data for fun. We actually use it, and we have real-time algorithms that adjust it. There's a number of things that get into this. We've focused on numbers very significantly. What we first understood when we got into this, we had this idea, sunlight's free. All the greenhouse guys love sunlight's free. It's not free. Everything costs money. And when you're in an indoor farm, everything you want to do costs money. So you better know if you want to do it or not. And so you need numbers to do that. And so what we did was we started collecting numbers on everything. I mean everything. And then we put it in a spreadsheet and analyze the situation to decide what to do. Sometimes the things that you think you want to do turned out not to be what you want to do. Like, for instance, we assumed that having the highest yield lettuce plants was a good idea. But as it turns out, the labor associated with harvesting a bigger lettuce plant is actually more than a smaller lettuce plant. And if we grew smaller plants more often, at less labor costs, we actually made more margin than if we grew bigger lettuce plants. And as it turns out, customers don't like big lettuce leaves, they like small lettuce leaves. So there's so many points of data that you have to understand, and we believe this is really a manufacturing game. This is all about knowing the process, knowing all of the numbers associated with the process, and optimizing that process. It is not an art. If you want to do art, you get a garden.
Go to art college, correct. Or do aquaponics, which is art and science, and both in the same place. So, but as far as data, good point, and I agree. And Matt is probably one of the most advanced vertical farmers as far as data is concerned in the world. And I mean, they've done tremendous amount of work. I've seen him doing it and collecting the data and actually putting it to use. Something that we had hard time with for two reasons. Number one, data is only as good as the hardware that's behind it. So to develop good hardware that you can adjust and change and modify and make it work properly based on your data inputs, it takes money and time. And we never had as luxury of having a limited amount of resources or enough money to do these things. But also I look at data as kind of two different groups. One is data that you can use on day-to-day, kind of shoe polish, wash your car, clean your floor, data understanding of your process that you can really easily deploy at the human scale and really direct your workers better and more efficiently. And there's that second part of data that really is, very useful when you need to adjust your cooling systems or nutrient delivery systems and air movement and lighting recipes and so forth, which really requires a lot of money and data, in hardware to be truly deployed. But data is key to future success in vertical farming, and data is going to allow us to be much more efficient in the future.
Do you think that the new technologies coming out, we have some controllers here like Blue Lab, for example, do you think those new controllers will bring down the price of that hardware?
Oh, absolutely, just like any other component of a vertical farm. I mean, we can talk about lighting, for example. I mean, when we started, lighting was 4 or 5 times as more expensive as it is today and much more inefficient. much less efficient. And I think that understanding of data, it's not only about collecting it, correct? We can collect million data points, and so what? What are we going to do with it? How are we going to convey that information? How are we going to teach our hardware what needs to be done, and how flexible is our hardware? At the end of the day, what is the understanding of our workers and growers, and how they can really use that data in a productive way? So, I'm a little concerned when people are just overly focused on data, but it's very important.
Thanks.
So, yeah, I just had a couple things to say. As much as possible, so we did not have a lot of sensors embedded in the system. In fact, it was very low tech from that perspective. And so we had basically humans cutting lettuce, measuring tared totes, and then in that process, there's a lot of room for error. And we were not doing biomass readings, which really would have fit kind of the production side of the metrics. So make sure you're doing kind of biomass and saleable product measurements. That would be my advice. I think an opportunity is that's approaching is the implementation of augmented reality and machine vision and machine learning. And there's a product here, Huxley, that's kind of the start of it in this space. But if you look at manufacturing lines, the big companies like IBM have made bets on augmented reality for the industrial manufacturing lines. And what that enables is basically having actionable data on the floor that is relevant and ready to use, but also lowering the skill requirement for an operator. So if you have an augmented reality headset on, you can walk into a space and basically go to a new process, be able to pull up that process and have all sorts of information that will reduce the amount of training hours required. And this is kind of a long-term thing, but it's starting right now and something to be definitely aware of.
One thing to think about is in the 7 years I've been in this industry, every year is the same. Everybody's looking to the new technology that's going to be here as the magic bullet to save anything. It's been lights historically. I'll tell you that once you get into a numbers-driven process, you'll see that lights are a very small part of the overall equation. It's really about the entire system. But one thing you should appreciate is we have passed that point of economic viability with current technology. You don't have to wait for some new technology to come out. We achieved a cost per pound, all-inclusive COGS, SG&A, depreciation, the works, of $1.36 per pound. And I can tell you for a fact that you cannot grow organic lettuce in California and ship it to Atlanta for less than $1.36 a pound. We are there technology-wise. And yes, technology is going to improve, and we are looking forward to lowering that $1.36 a pound, but there's a number right there that tells you this is viable as an industry.
So just as a follow-up question to that, Matt, if the prices are so low, then what held you back with the Atlanta facility? Was it distribution or?
Well, I distinctly remember the passion that went into our decision to pivot away from being an operator to being a technology provider. We had just recently come back from a meeting with Kroger in Cincinnati, and they told us they were ready to order $25 million annually of product from us if we would just build the farm to support that. And we were sitting there, this is our wildest dreams. We are ready to go. This is everything we always wanted. And then we realized how much capital that was going to require, how many people we were going to have to hire. And then we talked to Whole Foods and Fresh Market, and they wanted us to go national and do this. And every retailer told us the same thing. We will buy it if you will build it. And we realized we were simply incapable of building everything that they wanted. And that's when we decided that there was a bigger opportunity for us, and we thought a bigger opportunity for the industry, to use our technology with a lot of other people, so that that huge demand could be satisfied by multiple operators, not just by us. And it was really a heavy heart when we decided to shut down the farm, but we decided on it, and we think that it was the right decision.
Yeah, so that's interesting. The decentralized model sounds like what you're going for is, to have multiple operators serving their local market might make more sense than trying to have one operator serve the entire country across the whole country. And that also kind of brought on a new question. You talked about how capital seemed to be a big bottleneck in scaling up and in what you were trying to do. You talked about also raising $15 million. What was the source of the funding that you all received for your projects, and what advice would you offer for folks in the room here today who are looking for funding and who are looking for the right source of funding? Because we know all money is not necessarily equal, and you want someone to fund you who's going to be a partner and who's invested in your vision and in your dream and in your business as you scale up. So what else do you have to say about funding, I guess? And then we'll go to Paul.
Can I start? Okay, so money can make your business successful or can bring it down. And what happened to FarmedHere is the quality of the last round of money brought down the company. So that's exactly what happened. It's not our gross margins, it's not our product, it's not understanding of technology, it's simply bad decisions on the management side, or lack of passion and so forth. As far as money is concerned, I'll be happy to walk you guys really quickly on how we raised money for FarmedHere, because I think it's going to be really informative for you. So the first round we've done in 2009 was just founders. We founded the company in R&D out of our own pockets. But later we approached some angels. We raised $4 million at a really nice $12 million valuation and started going into a commercial scale operation. Subsequently, we realized there are other sources of money than equity or VCs and so forth. And our experience working with Whole Foods Market, for example, as Matt said, they're a great company to work with. Not only they mentored us, but Whole Foods Market actually became our supporter financially as well, and they gave us 2 loans. Actually, we obtained 2 largest local producer loan facilities out of their program and nationally, at a national level. So this was very helpful. But when we realized, as we, none of us were actually farmers, as we started talking to banks and lenders and lawyers and so forth, and we realized actually we are a farm, correct? So being a farm, we asked ourselves the question, is there any type of farm credit available that is available to traditional farmers? Could this be utilized for vertical farming? Actually, turns out it did. So successfully, we have obtained millions of dollars of financing from an Illinois-based, federally insured farm credit lender. So farm credit is available. So I think it's a combination of all of it. But most importantly, you have to look at what is the value that comes with that investment. Is it only dollars? And is it nuisance? Is it support? Is it headache? What are you getting out of that investor, and who is the money provider? If it's a bank, usually you're not going to get a lot of support other than low interest rate, much lower than from a private investor. If it's a private investor, is that investor adding any value into your business in the sense of helping you scale up, help you build operations, bring resources, sales, marketing, whatever it may be, or even technology? So I think that's the critical part, and we did not have a luxury of picking the money and choosing the money. We started raising the first round right after the crash of 2008, pretty much. So not only we were middle of the financial crisis, but also we were trying to raise money for a business or industry that did not even exist at that time.
So things have changed a lot over the years on how to raise money. When we first started, there was not farm credit available. USDA actually had a policy that they only provided credit for rural farms. I'm going to go ahead and claim credit for this, but the City of Atlanta actually brought Secretary Prisker, who's Secretary of Commerce, down to meet some local Atlanta companies, and I got to sit with her, and she said, "Hey, what could the Commerce Department do for you?" And I said, "Hey, can you talk to the USDA and tell them to make their loans available to urban farms too?" And she sent me a letter. She said, "I will talk to the Secretary of Agriculture for you." And they did change their policy, and it is now available.
So you did that, actually. I had no idea. So actually, he had that conversation. Thank you, Matt. And we got the loan a year later. So thank you, man.
So that's the only time that I've ever gotten anything out of the government. Maybe the last time, we'll see. But this is a capital-intensive business. Make no mistake about it. We did pretty good in the grocery stores with our product, and one of the major brands that you buy today probably came to our door, and they actually called us up and said, "Hey, can we fly in and meet you guys?" And we, of course, said, "Absolutely, no problem. Love to see you." And then we decided to shut down our farm. So we called them back up and said, hey, we decided to shut down our farm. Do you still want to visit? And they said, absolutely, even more so. Maybe we'll buy it. And so we talked to them, and we sat down, and one of the things we did was we said, okay, let's use your market data. You're really smart about grocery stores throughout the United States. You tell us what we can do. And we asked a question, forget organic, forget traditional salad mix. If you guys were going to bet the company on building out a local brand of salad mix by building distributed farms throughout the country, how big could we be? What would you need to start with? And you know what they came up with? This is using their data and their analysis. They would need to spend $400 million to build out the facilities across the United States to go after the amount of market share that they are interested in, which is not 100%. And this is a major publicly traded company that understands this business, I assure you that. That is how big the opportunity is, and that is also how capitally intensive it is.
Yeah, thanks for that, Matt. I think one of the metrics around the demand for leafy greens and lettuce is something like 6 billion pounds a year. I'll have to fact check that, but I think it's around that number. So that's a lot more than we're growing indoors now. I think now, I mean, I know AeroFarms claims they grow 2 million pounds a year. So we're talking about a very small amount of market penetration. So there's definitely a big opportunity there. I want to open up the discussion to the crowd in the room in just a minute, but I do want to have one last rapid fire question, which is any metrics or numbers that you folks would be willing to share on electricity costs or labor costs or anything to help the people in the room fill in their spreadsheets as they do their business plan and modeling. And then after that, we're going to open that up to questions from the room.
Sure. On labor, we were hiring people starting wage at $9 an hour, and it went up to $12 as they gained experience and they became team leaders and really did a better job. I told you earlier that our all-in cost was about $1.36 a pound. We didn't start there. We got there in the end after a lot of development. When it comes to power, power is a really complex thing. You heard a little bit about Georgia Power talking about off-peak pricing. We actually worked with Georgia Power and we bought wholesale power by the hour, with literally every hour changing. Our average price for power through their program was 3.1 cents a kilowatt hour. Now that's through smart buying on our part with some of our software and other things, but I assure you there's nobody who's offering power at 3.1 cents a kilowatt hour anywhere in the United States. So Georgia Power's program is unique in the country, and it's pretty awesome.
It's pretty amazing. 3.1. I wish I was in Atlanta 5 years ago, but so yeah, labor is a number one operating cost in any greenhouse or vertical farm today. Maybe there are a few exceptions in Japan where they're heavily automated, but generally speaking, labor is a number one operating cost. We were hiring people at $12 to $15 an hour, kind of entry level, and we were very much mission-driven company, so wanted to pay people living wages, and we did. Power is the second largest operating cost, and we were able to negotiate, being in Chicago, through leveraging some manufacturing associations, a long-term contract. I think it was under 6 cents per kilowatt hour, so pretty decent for the area. However, like Matt said, I mean, there are all kinds of opportunities to sit down and talk to your power companies and utility providers and structure long-term power agreements. That's not the issue. The issue with power for most of vertical farms is power availability. As you look at buildings and you try to underwrite your future location, ask about power service and make sure that there is plenty of infrastructure in the area, neighborhood, your community, your city to actually allow that high demand service into your building. Because as we found working through other cities as well, that sometimes tends to be challenging. Now on the other costs, just to give you an idea, our gross margin, without reaching the sufficient scale, but just on the gross margin, cost of goods sold was in high 20s. And we could have pushed it to probably 30-40%, based on the technology we were using at that time. And please recall, in Met, one of the reasons we're getting a little bit more money is because we were organic. And so we specifically competed with organic traditional farmers out of California, and we were competitive. So we asked maybe a little bit of a premium, compared to a traditional, Midwest-grown greenhouse product, but we were competitive to organic.
And I'll still say that local is worth more than organic.
Local, I don't disagree with you. Local is new organic, and local is a commodity at this point. Organic is a commodity. We all know that. Walmart is the largest seller of organic food in the world right now, bigger than Whole Foods even as far as volume is concerned, dollars. So yeah, local is a new standard, and organic, I think, is still a valuable standard because based on our experience, what was really interesting about organic really gives the customer a sense of security. It's basically their understanding of, if it's organic, it must be cleaner. If it's organic, it must be healthier and better for me. So.
I just have one quick thing to add on that. We were located on the rooftop, as I said, and we were beside a building that was just a language school. And I brought my father to come see the site. He's in the construction industry, and pretty much within a minute, he said, "Okay, so where are you getting the heat waste from?" Heating our facility in our climate was one of our biggest expenses because we were using an ETFE inflated greenhouse from the Netherlands. So I would just advise, like, check your numbers with geographers and the climate you're building in before you build, and look for opportunities where you can access heat waste in order to reduce costs and integrate some hybrid aspects to your building.
So can I just add one more comment I think you guys are going to find interesting is greenhouse to vertical farm, correct comparison. I mean, there's a lot of debate going on. So fortunately or unfortunately enough for me, I've purchased an aquaponic greenhouse from my mentor, Miles Harston, who was one of the early inventors of the aquaponic commercial scale technology. He built a 15,000 square foot greenhouse in Illinois, about 100 miles southwest of Chicago. It was an aquaponic, very modern aquaponic system, kind of medium quality, inflated type of, greenhouse. So we ran it for a number of years, and we compared our operating costs to our vertical farm. And not only a vertical farm produced anywhere from 20 to 40 times the amount of food per square foot that we could produce out of the greenhouse, but actually turns out that our gross margins were substantially higher. So I'm not against greenhouses, but you have to be very careful, just like you said, about heating, cooling costs. It's both heating and cooling in regions like Midwest that really come to play.
Yeah, thanks for those answers. And I just want to say about the infrastructure, just a quick plug for my company, Blue Planet Consulting. As you do your infrastructure search and you look for sites, and as Paul mentioned, you have to look at the amperage of the building and the voltage and making sure that you have the right drainage and all these sorts of things. So site selection is something that service that Blue Planet Consulting offers, and we can help you research your site and validate that that's a good site. We can also do crop selection research and equipment research, vendor analysis, due diligence services, these types of things. So with that quick plug out of the way, I'd like to open it up to the audience for questions, and I'd like to call up my assistant, Susanna, who will take this microphone so that the rest of the room can hear your questions.
Thank you. Okay. So I wanted to say that all four of you did a fantastic job. That was one of the best panels I've ever been to. Super informative. I mean,
Thank you.
this is,
Thank you.
Thank you.
yeah, congratulations. So out of curiosity, I heard Matt say that your production was running extremely well. Your costs were very well managed. And then you said if you did have the opportunity to team up, and you actually were talking about teaming up, getting some help in sales, then that would be a phenomenal kind of mix, right? So out of curiosity, how come that never came to fruition? How come you guys didn't finish the acquisition and live happily ever after?
Well, at the time we were talking to FarmedHere, the chairman of the company was a gentleman named Mark Tomlin, and him and I developed a really good working relationship. We liked each other. We saw the synergies of the respective company. He comes from the brand world. He really thought about sales and marketing. I'm a tech guy. I was really thinking about operations and costs. We really felt like there was a good synergy. Ultimately, he took the deal to his board, and the board decided no and hired a new CEO named Matt Matros. At the time, Mark actually resigned because he thought that was the wrong move to make. Matt Matros lasted for about 6 months. And then and then another CEO came in. So basically, long story short, I think Mark was right, FarmedHere was wrong, and I think that's part of the reason why they went down.
I agree, and that's one of the reasons that I left the company as well, and other founders, because of just major disagreements on the philosophy and the future growth of the company. But it's easier to say it and do it, said than done, because these mergers are very complicated, and especially when you have startup companies with different ownership structures and different financing structures and different cap tables and so forth. These are very difficult mergers to conceive, even in the established industries, correct? So where's the money coming from? And I think the main concern with those type of merger discussions at that time was, what's next? Once we merge, where's the money coming from? It's not like you can go to private equity in 2013 and say, hey, I need $100 million to consolidate some vertical farms. It just was not available, correct?
We have a question here coming from Facebook Live from Andrew Carter at Smallhold. His question is, how did timing come into play with the issues that you had with your farm? Did anybody feel like they were too early for the market? And if so, what do they think about the current market and our future market for this offering?
There is some interesting timing. One of the things that happened to us, I remember distinctly with Whole Foods, I said to them, hey, we want to sell in your store. And they said, great, we're happy to have you. And I said, we want to be right there. And I pointed to the salad mix shelf where all the California guys were. And he's like, no, we'll put you over here. You'll be local. We'll market you as local. And I said, no, I want to be there. That's the market I'm going against. And he said to me, if you want to be there, you got to step up your game. You got to have a food safety program. You got to wash, sanitize your lettuce. He listed out a bunch of things we had to do. And what I decided to do at that point was stop and do all those things. And then I came back to the table with Whole Foods, and I was ready to go. They came back. They saw our GFSI audited facility. They were very happy with what we did, and we came out as the only company in the space with that kind of food safety program, with a washed, ready-to-eat product that was exactly the same as what was on the market. And that cost us a lot of time and a lot of money, and now a lot of the vertical farms have managed to convince the grocery stores that they don't need their product to be washed because it's already clean, and the grocery stores have been willing to overcome their liability issues that they had previously about that. And there is a difference in cost between washing and not washing your product that is material and important.
Yeah, that's a great subject, actually. Washing or wash or not wash, correct? I mean, do we need to wash our leafy greens? I don't think it's necessary, subject to current regulations. Actually, FDA did a study. It was coincidental as we were getting to the point where we were about to decide to start washing our greens, because we were not. FDA came with a study suggesting that actually washing greens with 10 parts per million chlorine mix and so forth is actually increasing the risk of spreading disease, pathogens, than versus not washing. So that said, timing, the question was on timing, I think. Timing was okay. We were a little early on the technology side. I wish there were as many wonderful companies as there are, in this room today, for example, providing lighting and hydroponic grow systems and cooling system, mechanical design, and you name it, or people like Matt, with his algorithms and and computer brain. They were simply not available. But generally speaking, the market was there. The will of the public was there to support us. The will of the government was there to support us and give us the approvals that we needed. And actually, we found money. I think that we were maybe a little early, but not too early.
So from our perspective, I don't think that we were too early for customer adoption. We had some enthusiasm. We're a very green city generally, and I think it was more timing was about the capitalization of the company and having enough runway to sell that first system to keep it going. So, yeah, we had no research and development budget, so you need a lot of money. I mean, this is not like building an app. There's a lot of expenses, and I'd say you can probably not have too much support.
Yeah, and just to reiterate the scale thing, I remember fondly the days when I saw our numbers and I said, hey, if we just add a 0 or 2 zeros to this when we scale, look how much money we're going to make. And of course, what happened was every time we scaled, it was way harder than we expected it to be, and our costs changed, and our challenges that we ended up having were unexpected. And every time we scaled, that happened. And scale's a really huge factor. I mean, now that I'm in the technology business and I do compete against other technology companies that, for people who are looking to build vertical farms, you know, we'll find people who they're presenting numbers for a facility of a size that they've never built before. And we look at those numbers and they're like, no way, no way. Because when they actually try to do that, that's not going to happen, because we learned it the hard way. So if you have some idea that you've tested things out on a small scale and you're going to increase your scale and nothing's going to change, that is way wrong.
Question. My name is David Epstein. Our company is Bioponica. We're an Atlanta-based company producing, building systems for soilless farmers to grow plants, as well as creating liquid organic fertilizer from biomass. My question is for you, Paul. Just curious, you made the decision to go organic with your system. Curious how you found it possible to get organic certification for non-soil agriculture, soilless agriculture, and also how did you find? Well, a couple questions. What sort of source of organic fertilizers were you using, and how did that affect your bottom line?
Okay, so very simple. To get organic certified in hydroponics is allowable today under the National Organic Plan. You can have your system certified organic. It's not a prohibited thing. So it's just a matter of designing your process and developing an organic system plan that complies with USDA regulations. As far as the liquid nutrients, if that's what your question is, I mean, our systems were aquaponics, because at that time, I don't recall a single manufacturer that would make an organic liquid fertilizer that would work. So we had to develop our own in aquaponics. There are a number of aquaponic farms across the country that are USDA organic certified, so we're not the only one. And I hope that answers your question. And you have to work with, you know, certifiers that are willing to listen. You know, some of you, how many of you actually are in organic farming? How many of you are certified organic today? Very few people, or almost none. So I think it's a new subject. So you really have to spend a lot of time talking to your organic certifiers, because the way it works, USDA at federal level has guidelines and regulations, but they're being interpreted by the organic certifiers, and they're doing all the work that's necessary.
I'm sure Paul will agree with me that going organic is going to be more complicated than not organic, and there will be some added costs and complexities there. One thing to appreciate that we learned from market research was that the #1 reason why people choose organic salad mix is because they think it's pesticide free. That's not true, but that's what they think. And what we learned is that when we marketed our product as pesticide free, people looked at it and said, hey, that's what I'm looking for. And we actually educated the Whole Foods staffers on the fact that organic wasn't pesticide free. They were like amazed too. And then they started telling their customers this, and the customers got mad at the organic companies for having pesticides on it. And it's worse, because actually a number of USDA studies have shown that the pesticide residual on organic lettuce is actually higher than traditional, because it's not water soluble. So it's much harder to wash off. So it's really fascinating that pesticides is the big issue for consumers. And if you can find a way to address that big issue for consumers, you're going to win.
I need to make one comment just before, just one comment. Great point, Matt. But Also, I really want to warn all of you and request, actually, I have a personal favor to ask, guys. Any of you who are going to develop vertical farm and start selling product, please do not label it as pesticides free. Such a thing doesn't exist, okay? We all get pests, even inside a most sophisticated vertical farm. From time to time, you're gonna, even in organic system production, yeah, you may want to spray your plants with garlic, correct? But technically, it's a pesticide. So just making these statements sometimes is untrue and unreal. And Matt is absolutely correct. Growing in a controlled environment gives you that ability to really minimize the number of inputs being used and have a transparency that the customers are looking for. They want to know what's in their food, where it comes from, and they need to be educated.
So just to add to that, to conflict here a little bit, we were 100% pesticide free. We never used anything. Every pesticide residual test ever done on our product, including by the Department of Ag and their surprise inspections, we always passed. We received 100% certification on GFSI. We were kosher certified. Understand, the only way to be kosher certified is to have no bugs, even microscopic ones. It is possible to have an indoor farm and not use pesticides. We proved it. I know you can do it too. Don't use pesticides, they're bad.
He raised the bar very high, guys, but that's okay.
Okay, my name is Pamela Bingham. I'm with Virginia State University's Urban Agricultural Center, and I'm originally from Mississippi. I have some workforce questions based on someone's statement probably 20 minutes ago that I found to be kind of interesting. It almost sounded like you didn't anticipate some of the workforce issues you were going to have. So my question is, what was the size of your workforce? What were the shifts? What kind of technical training did you employ? And did you use an outside trainer for perhaps the soft skill issues? I heard somebody say that they were mission driven, which sort of said to me that you may have been working with a community group. So did you just have your basic HR issues, or were there issues that were specific to vertical farming?
Excellent question. I think certainly one of the mistakes I made coming from the high-tech world is not understanding what our workforce was going to be like, what it took to manage that kind of workforce, and all of the what would be normal issues for that kind of workforce that I didn't encounter in a professional technical environment, right? Things like, having a time clock and people, clocking in for other people, and, just some basic things that I think most businesses that have wage workers have long ago dealt with. We didn't even think about them because we didn't realize what we didn't know. Hiring was a huge problem. We initially said, hey, we want to hire people in the local community. Let's go reach out to our city council person and try and get some help. And it was very difficult to find people or find out how to hire them and things like that. So there was a lot of misunderstandings from our standpoint of where to find people, because we were so used to our sort of professional world in an office space, and this not being that at all.
Very interesting point, Matt. I mean, our experience is very different. I think I was very intimately involved in the workforce development at FarmedHere, and because I come from a construction background in real estate development, I had years of experience working with people in the construction industry, and also lower skilled or lower paid workers and so forth. So our general understanding of what the expectations are was there, and that's why we decided to outsource the job training program to an outside entity, in this case a non-for-profit called Windy City Harvest, part of Chicago Botanic Garden. As I mentioned, we have developed a job training program with city colleges of Chicago. The city of Chicago gave us a building or part of a building and a space, and they built a greenhouse, and we helped them write a curriculum and so forth. And there was to train workers at a basic level, anything from operations and growing, personal hygiene, food safety, workers' safety, and so forth. We have voluntarily reached out to OSHA at the federal level and local Department of Labor as well, because we realized early on that there is no standard for vertical farming. We did not want to be perceived by federal regulators as as a manufacturing process company. At the same time, we were not sure if we're actually a farm company. There are a lot of topics that you need to discuss as far as your workforce, because for example, if you have a greenhouse or a vertical farm and you file your tax returns as a farm, in the eyes of IRS and federal government, you are a farm subject to 1930s, 40s, and 1980s Farm Acts. Your workers are not to be paid overtime, for example. So, I mean, we were paying overtime anyway, but there are all kinds of exceptions and benefits that traditional farmers get that maybe you can get in your vertical farm as well. You know, to answer your question, ma'am, I think workforce is surprisingly a challenging subject, despite the fact that we had a lot of experience from previous careers on workforce development. It was still challenging to find enough skilled workers, or even people to be willing to get trained in farming in inner cities, you know, where the unemployment was, you know, 30, 40, 50% in some of the neighborhoods. It was still difficult.
Henry, how are we doing on time? Okay, looks like we've got about 5 minutes, so let's move on to the next question.
Hey guys, Ricky Stevens from AgTechX. First of all, just want to echo that first comment. It's really courageous that you guys are up here, and it's been an awesome panel. Secondly, if you guys could go back to the drawing board and you had, I gave you $5 million imaginary dollars, what new farm concept would you come up with today?
I can't tell you. Okay, I know, but I can't tell you. It's worth a lot of money. So, but definitely it's different. So there are a lot of changes. You know, some of the things we already talked about, and Matt mentioned. You know, do not use lifts, correct? And you know, do not go up and down. You see, this is the FarmedHere system. It was 24 feet tall. Which means we had to use, you know, very, very long, the longest available electric lifts. So really, I think the best advice I can give you, think about it as a manufacturing process, as a production process, and really spend a lot of time thinking about, you know, how you're going to grow your food from A to Z. Once you understand, of course, what you want to grow and how you're going to sell it, and at what price points you're trying to achieve, what is your market, and so forth.
So the fact that we keep designing new facilities, and we're actively building new facilities now throughout the world, we get to ask ourselves that question every time we go to design a new facility. And absolutely, we learn from the last facility. The big things that we're dealing with now, because some of the facilities we're working on are so large, are really logistical issues of how do we move people around? How do we keep people from bumping into each other? How do we get people to do things consistently? And so, like the farm that we're designing right now in the Middle East is so large that it would literally take too long to walk from one end to the other. So now all the hallways that we used to build now have to be bigger, because you have to be able to have an electric vehicle that can drive down the hallways. So on. There's so many of those things. So size really matters when you're designing this. But also, you know, you learn some lessons over the years that are really, really helpful. And the big thing is, if you can't clean it, don't build it. That's a really big thing. There's so many people who are still selling equipment right now that you can't clean. Don't buy it if you can't clean it. And cleaning is so important. I mean, you know, one of the things I told someone earlier, we were talking about cell phones. I said, you know, in my farm, you can't have a cell phone on the farm because a cell phone is dirty. You know, if you put your workers there and you're trying to protect your plants from your workers, and they put on gloves and then they reach into their pocket and answer their cell phone, where was that cell phone? It's full of things. You got to take away all of that stuff. And so it really requires a whole paradigm shift. I would highly suggest find a food safety consultant and learn before you design your facility, because they will tell you so many things that you would have never thought of when it comes to food safety, that they know, because these people, they audit food facilities. They've seen everything. And the ones that have killed people, they've learned what they did wrong. And understand that you want to be a farmer who's delivering wonderful product to your customers. You don't want to be a mass murderer. and you could be. Just realize that.
Yeah, thanks for, I mean, that's a very serious thing. Food safety is very serious and something to definitely consider. So thanks for that. You could also be a mass murderer of plants because you could kill a lot of your plants as you go through your R&D. I'm sure these guys have killed a lot of plants in their learning curve. Whoa, cool. A train's going by. We're really in the freight depot, huh? Downtown Atlanta. So, Henry, do we have time for one more question, or should I wrap it up here? All right, one last question, and then I'm going to wrap it up. Yeah, turn your mic on, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Jeff Bednar from Dallas, Texas. We have a greenhouse aquaponics facility, and I'm curious as to your opinion on where the difference between hydroponics and aquaponics is going to be going over the next few years.
Okay, so I'll be happy to answer that. So, welcome. I'm from Austin, Texas. So thank you. The major difference between aquaponics and synthetic fertilizers, in my opinion, is that aquaponics is still more of an art than science. It is a living organism, and you have to be very conscious of that. I have successfully designed and built and operated aquaponics systems that produce very good returns. For about 2.5 years, we have studied side-by-side large-scale grow systems that were based on 3 different methodologies. One was aeroponics, low pressure. Second was aquaponics, deep raft system, and then shallow raft with synthetic fertilizer. We ran them for that period of time side-by-side to really understand the costs of operation, not only this, but also quality of the crop that we can achieve, and obviously economics. So I think that as aquaponic becomes more and more popular, and I think there's a better understanding of it, and you need to set your expectations properly. If your expectations are set properly, aquaponics could be a fantastic method of growing organic crops.
So this is actually a big subject, and we don't have time to answer it thoroughly. So I'm going to just throw out some quick pot shots just to make it interesting. I hate aquaponics. I think it's a terrible idea. Here's another example. The first gentleman ever to get a PhD in aquaponics will tell you firsthand not to do it. So if you ever talk to Nate from Bright Aerotech, feel free to get his opinion on it as well. But the essential thing is, what people who tell me aquaponics is supposed to achieve is free fertilizer. So you have a fish farm, you have a lettuce farm, what have you. They work together in an ecosystem, and you end up with free fertilizer. I can tell you that the cost of my fertilizer was so inconsequential that the risk associated with trying to get free fertilizer is totally not worth it. So I am glossing over a lot of facts here, and there's a whole discussion to be had for this. But I just wanted to throw out that, I think that you really have to understand the risks that go involved in it. Is it possible to make it work? Yes. Have people made it work? Absolutely. And you can certainly compare those. But I want you to think about the biggest aquaponics farm in the world and how big that is and how long it's been running. And why is it so small and so short-lived in comparison to synthetic?
I don't disagree, but I disagree at the same time. What he said was very important, that there are those challenges associated with aquaponics. As I said, I mean, you have to set your expectations. It's a living organism. It's a completely different thinking than growing with synthetics. But at the same time, the cost, if your objective is cost of your fertilizer, cost of your nutrients, and you want it to be zero, it's absolutely achievable. I mean, we ran aquaponic systems where actually once we sold our fish, our fertilizer cost was zero. And I'm not even including, the micronutrients and other things that you need to add to supplement what the fish actually can produce on your biofiltration system. So, but that said, Matt made a very good point. How come there are no very, very, very large aquaponic greenhouses or farms that have been around for 20 or 30 years? And there's got to be a reason for that. I think it's consequential and coincidental to some extent, because maybe there was not enough understanding of aquaponics. And it scares a lot of people. On the food safety front, we can argue here for hours. I think aquaponics actually is safer than a synthetic wren system, and because of the microbial environment and beneficial bacteria and so forth. And we've done a lot of work and research working with beneficial bacteria strains, EM1s and others, and trying to really, take aquaponics to the next level, and possibilities are amazing. That said, I am a big fan of synthetic fertilizers, and I love hydroponics, and there's nothing wrong with it.
So, wow, what a panel, right, guys? I just want to say, again, 1,000 thank yous to you guys. This was really brave to talk about your facilities and the challenges and strains that you faced, and I think the industry and the sector and all the peoples in this room are very grateful to hear your experience, to hear your knowledge, and hopefully apply those battle-worn, tried and true experiences to their operations. Okay, sure.
One thing I want to say is again, I'm really concerned about this title, Examination of Shuttered Farms. One thing I'm going to tell you guys, I think 3 of us are still in the same business, correct? We're 3 of us, we're still in vertical farming. We love it. The fact that those farms did not work out in the form that we've created them early on, it's okay. It's been a learning lesson. This industry is very viable, and we're rolling up our sleeves and getting to work on vertical farming 2.0.
Yeah. So we'll all be around, and I just think that there was so much good conversation that went on here. I almost want to do like a follow-up podcast on agritecture.com. So maybe we'll do that one time. We'll keep an eye out for that. And thanks again to all of you for participating. Hope this was valuable to you all.